Music. There were many reasons Earth exiled its own children, but the loudest one was simple. Humanity was just too much, too aggressive, too ambitious, too unwilling to bow. That was the argument anyway. The united coalition of the solar system, desperate to appease its fragile alliance with the Galactic Council, decided that the best solution to galactic peace was to kick its own species out of the cradle. And so, they sent us away. They gave us rusting colony ships, packed us in like livestock, and flung us out beyond the map borders of civilized space, with the expectation that we'd die out there, screaming into the void. The reality? We made the void our home. The exiles were not the soft-spoken diplomats of Earth, nor the academics who debated endlessly over the ethics of ambition. No, those sent into the black were pioneers, soldiers, engineers, men who could rip apart a problem with their hands and forge a solution from the wreckage. Men who understood that survival was a contest, and winning meant taking what you needed. The first years were brutal: starvation, disease, mutiny. But hardship was just another obstacle to overcome. We adapted, we scavenged, we hunted, then we conquered. Humanity became the thing the galaxy feared most: competition. While the Council races measured progress in careful centuries, we did it in decades. Where they avoided war like a plague, we wielded it like a scalpel. We found unclaimed worlds, stripped them bare, built cities from their bones. We found weak neighbours, broke them, and took what they would not surrender willingly. And now, 100 years after the exile, the galaxy stands at a crossroads. They can fight us, or they can kneel. They won't surrender. General Hark strode across the bridge of the Iron Will, watching the stars glitter like distant threats. The Council still thinks we're the same broken exiles they cast away. Commander ROR leaned against the tactical console, a grin playing at his lips. That's the thing, sir. They don't realise they're already losing. The display flickered to life, showing a map of the known galaxy marked in red. The territory of the exiled Confederation had grown over the last decade, like a spreading infection. Formerly neutral systems now bore the sigil of the Iron Sun, humanity's new banner. Even species that once shunned us had bent the knee in exchange for a place in our war machine. We took Denvar 5 in under a week, Roar continued, zooming in on the latest conquest. The Thren fleets never saw us coming. Half their ships were still in dry dock when our boarding teams hit their stations. By the time they got a distress signal out, we had already taken the capital. Hark nodded. And the survivors? The useful ones were offered a choice: work for us or be left behind. Roar smirked. Most made the right decision. The general clasped his hands behind his back, staring at the star map. And the Council? How are they reacting? Roar's smirk widened. Poorly. They're sending an envoy. That made Hark chuckle. I hope they bring gifts. Better. They're sending Chancellor Vorin himself. Hark raised an eyebrow. The same Vorin who called us reckless brutes, unfit for civilization. The very one he's docking at, Outpost Helios, in 3 days. He wants to negotiate. Hark exhaled sharply. And what do they think they can offer us? ROR shrugged. Probably an insult wrapped in diplomacy. But that's the beauty of it, sir. We don't need anything from them anymore. We have resources, fleets, and manpower. We've taken everything we need by force. If Vorin is coming to beg, that means they're desperate. Hark turned back to the viewport, watching as a fleet of human-made warships drifted silently through the void. No longer were they the outdated husks of their exile. No longer were they the unwanted dregs of Earth's cowardice. Each vessel bore the scars of conquest, outfitted with stolen technology, and improved by minds that had learned to turn adversity into advantage. Tell Helios to prepare a proper welcome, Hark said. Let Vorin see what his exiles have become. Roar straightened. And if he comes with demands? Hark grinned, the kind of grin that had made entire species tremble. Then we remind him why the Council should have killed us when they had the chance. The docking clamps hissed as Chancellor Vorin's sleek diplomatic vessel settled onto Outpost Helios. The station, once a derelict human way station, now gleamed with reinforced hull plating and state-of-the-art weaponry, a testament to what humanity had built in Exile. As the airlock cycled open, Vorin stepped forward, flanked by two solemn-faced guards from the Galactic Council. His silver robes barely concealed the tension in his posture. General Hark stood at the receiving end of the corridor, hands clasped behind his back, flanked by a dozen human officers in their midnight black uniforms. No ceremonial nonsense, no pretentious welcome. Just a long, unbroken stare. "Chancellor," Hark said, his voice carrying the weight of 100 conquests. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Vorin nodded stiffly. "General Hark, I come in the spirit of diplomacy." Hark gestured toward a side quarter. "Then let's not waste time. We have much to discuss." The delegation moved into a war room dominated by a massive holographic display. Red markings showed human-controlled space sprawling outward like a spreading fire. Council space remained a shrinking blue cluster at its edge. Vorin eyed the map before settling into a chair across from Hark. "This war cannot continue. The Council seeks terms for peace." Roar chuckled from his position at Hark's right. "Peace? That implies both sides have been fighting. This has been a series of retreats." Vorin exhaled through his nostrils. "Your expansion is unsustainable. Even now, you stretch your forces thin. Resources are finite. The Council is willing to negotiate an agreement, territorial boundaries, economic trade, an end to hostilities." Hark leaned forward. "An agreement? You mean a leash? You want to contain us, limit us, ensure we never threaten your precious status quo again." Vorin's hands tightened around the edge of the table. "Unchecked aggression will not benefit humanity. Sooner or later, your momentum will falter, and when it does, you will find yourself surrounded." Roar smirked. "Surrounded? That implies we fear them. The only reason the Council still exists is because we allow it." Vorin's gaze flickered between them. "You believe yourselves invincible. That arrogance will be your downfall." Hark folded his arms. "No, Chancellor. Our will to survive is what makes us dangerous. We were abandoned, cast out. We adapted. We grew. And now we are more than the sum of what we were." Vorin hesitated. "And what do you want, General?" Hark gestured to the star map. "Everything." The Chancellor's lips pressed into a thin line. "That is impossible." "Is it?" Hark's voice was measured. "We have the fleets, we have the technology, and we have something your Council fears more than anything." Vorin's expression darkened. "And what is that?" Hark's grin was slow and deliberate. "The will to take what we want." Silence filled the chamber. Vorin's guards stiffened, their hands inching toward their weapons. But the human officers stood unmoving, unconcerned. "You came here hoping we'd accept limits," Hark said, his voice calm but with steel beneath it. "But here's the problem, Chancellor. We've spent a century without limits. We built our own future when your kind left us to die. And now we are stronger than you ever feared we could be." Vorin took a slow breath. "Then what do you propose?" Hark tapped the table. The star map shifted, highlighting key Council strongholds. "We will allow the Council to retain its core worlds. But the outer territories, they belong to us now. We will not stop expanding. You will not interfere." Vorin stared at the map, his jaw tightening. "And if we refuse?" Roar's smirk returned. "Then the war you fear so much truly begins. And this time we won't stop at the outer territories." The Chancellor's fingers twitched. "You would doom billions to war." Hark's expression never wavered. "Your council doomed them the moment you exiled us." Vorin looked down, silent for a long moment. Then, at last, he nodded. "I will bring your proposal back to the council, but do not mistake this for submission." Hark stood. "I wouldn't dream of it, Chancellor. I expect a response in 1 week. If not, we'll take your silence as an answer." Vorin rose, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he turned and strode out, his guards close behind. As the doors closed behind him, Roar exhaled sharply. "Think they'll give in?" Hark's gaze remained on the star map. "They'll hesitate, they'll deliberate, and when they finally make their decision," he smiled, "it won't matter anymore." 1 week passed. The deadline came and went, and the Galactic Council remained silent. The silence meant only one thing: war. The first battle erupted on the border world of Ra 7, a strategically vital planet, rich in resources and positioned as a gateway into Council space. The Council, reluctant but pressed into action, sent their forces to repel the inevitable human offensive. Their fleets arrived in tight formation, their movements cautious, their commanders still under the illusion that diplomacy might yet prevail. Humanity did not waste time. No warnings, no speeches. The attack came with brutal precision. The exiled Confederation's warships, sleek, fast, and armed with technology refined through necessity, carved through the Council's defences like a blade through brittle glass. Coordinated strikes hit fuel depots, communication arrays, and planetary defences in the opening salvo. Council admirals, trained in slow, calculated warfare, were unprepared for an enemy that viewed speed as a weapon. It took less than 30 hours for Ra 7 to fall. General Hark stood aboard the Iron Will, observing the unfolding carnage through the main viewport. Flashes of destruction reflected in his cold eyes as Council ships detonated one by one. The humans had already secured the surface, and now the Council fleets were either retreating or burning. Commander ROR stood beside him, arms crossed. "They barely put up a fight." Hark nodded. "They never understood war the way we do. They never had to fight for their own existence." And now Hark turned his gaze, locking onto the holographic display of the galaxy. The Council's core systems glowed faintly, distant, but no longer unreachable. Now we move forward. Word of Ra 7's fall spread like wildfire. The Council's silence had cost them dearly. Their neutral worlds, long balancing between fear and loyalty, saw the shifting tides. Some surrendered immediately. Others sent envoys, eager to align themselves with humanity's unstoppable march. The Council, seeing their position erode by the day, made their last move. 3 weeks after Ra 7, the Council's largest armada launched a desperate counter-offensive. Their forces massed around Kuthra Prime, the last major barrier between humanity and the Council's homeworlds. Thousands of warships, more than humanity had ever faced at once, held formation over the planet. Hark studied the battlefield with quiet calculation. This is their final stand. Roar grinned. "Then let's break them." The battle for Kuthra Prime lasted 3 full days. The Council fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, but humanity had spent a century learning how to kill desperate creatures. Human warships, faster and more adaptable, wove through the sluggish formations of their enemy. Ground forces, hardened by decades of frontier warfare, tore through the Council's elite soldiers. Their strategies were obsolete, their weapons outdated, their resolve brittle. On the 4th day, Kuthra Prime fell. With its fall, the Council's remaining worlds crumbled. One by one, they surrendered, abandoned, or were taken by force. The Galactic Council, once a beacon of control and order, had become irrelevant. Humanity was no longer the exiled. They were the rulers. In the grand chamber of what remained of the Council, the last surviving members of the old order knelt before General Hark. Their robes, once pristine and adorned with symbols of power, were torn and dirtied. "You cannot rule through war forever," one of them rasped. Hark met his gaze with unwavering certainty. "We don't need to. We rule because we won. We rule because we survived what you never could." The chamber fell silent. Commander Roar, standing at Hark's side, smirked. "The old order is gone. Humanity is the future now." With that, the exiled Confederation's banner was raised over the halls of the former council. Humanity had conquered the stars. Years passed. The scars of war faded, but the lessons endured. The Zeons, once known for their brute force, had transformed into something far more formidable. A people who understood patience, adaptation, and endurance. Valkyrie stood in the Grand War Chamber, overseeing reports from the newly formed Galactic Alliance. It had started as a necessity, a desperate pact for survival. But now it was something more. Dozens of species had come together, inspired by what humanity had shown them. The galaxy was no longer a place of fleeting empires. It was a place of persistence, of endurance. Erist, now a legend in his own right, walked up to the central console. His face bore more lines, his hair had thinned slightly, but his presence remained unshaken. The same unrelenting force that had once stunned the Zaran still radiated from him. "Looks like you're running things differently these days," Erist mused. Valkyrie nodded. "We have adapted, and we will continue to do so." Erist smirked. "Told you it wasn't about brute strength." A chime interrupted them, signalling an incoming transmission. Valkyrie turned to the console and scanned it. The galaxy was changing once again. New threats, new challenges. But this time, they were ready. Valkyrie glanced at Erist. "Will your people fight alongside us again?" Erist chuckled. "You already know the answer to that." The stars stretched beyond them, infinite and untamed. The battles ahead would be long, the struggles immense. But for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to endure. Humanity had not just survived, they had reshaped the stars.